The following stories you are about to hear are off of the Darkness Prevails section of Reddit. I own no rights to these stories. I hope you enjoy, and don't get too scared. When I was 16, my grandmother passed away at home from cancer. She was on hospice and had been given a year to live and only lasted 3 months. My grandmother lived in that house for over 50 years with my grandfather, my dad, and my two uncles. The day she moved into that house, she placed a crucifix on the wall of my guest bedroom, and there it stayed for many years. My parents and I moved into the house once she passed away, and I was placed in the room with the cross. A few months later, I decided that I wanted to paint that part of my bedroom, so I had my dad get the paint and he cautiously removed the cross from its place. We painted for 2 days and nothing happened. The night of the second day, some of the walls were still a bit wet, so we left the cross down even though that spot had been painted first, so we could put it back up immediately. The night I had placed my sewing kit against the door to keep it mostly closed because the paint was still wet around the frame, so my cats wouldn't get into the room. Now, the following accounts are kind of weird, so in order for you to understand, I will explain. In order for my bedroom door to slam shut and be loud enough to wake me, you would have to open my door to the fullest angle and slam it with all your might, which means my sewing kit should be against the wall. Well, this night I was sound asleep facing the door as my bed was in the center of the room. I was awoken to the loudest slam I had ever heard, and I shot up in my bed. All my windows were locked, and my sewing kit was still against the door. It's like nothing had been touched. I laid back down and thought, if there is a murderer in here, he obviously did not see me, and I will be a rich girl in the morning. I fell back asleep. About an hour later, I woke up to the feeling someone was watching me. At this point, I had turned to face the wall on the other side of my bed. On this wall was my nightstand, a bench. My nightstand was away from the wall about 2 feet, and when I looked into the darkness of the corner, a figure stood there watching me. Solid black, over 5 foot in height, and very creepy. As I was still so tired, and rolled back over and thought, if I die, I will die laying comfortably in this bed. I woke up the next morning, only then realizing I had fallen asleep, and my mother cracked my door open to check on me. She smiled and shut it gently as I got out of bed, throwing my pajama pants and heading to the bathroom. As I came out, she asked me why I'd slammed the door so hard at last night, and I told her that I haven't even gotten out of bed once last night. She asked my dad if he had slammed anything, and he denied it as well. The paint was dry by then, and we could put the cross back up. A few hours later, a thought had occurred to me. This cross hasn't been moved in 50 years. I wonder what would happen if I tried to take it down again. Within seconds of that thought, I smelled burning wood. I looked down to my dresser and saw my straightener was on. I quickly shut it off and left my room. I hadn't touched my straightener that day, and it scared me. And then I didn't even have to think or aloud or act upon my thoughts to get a reaction. This happened to me when I was about 12 or 13 years old. I live in southern Michigan, and a lot of strange things happen in these woods. So a little backstory here. My dad and I volunteered for a bird banding station. Bird banding is where a researcher catches a bird and puts a tiny numbered band on its leg to study its migration patterns. We were careful not to hurt the birds, so we set up a mist nets to catch them. Rather than the traditional trap, they were always released in the end. The land we banded on was owned by the head researcher. Let's call him R. R's property was massive, with forest, marshlands, countryside, you name it. I loved to explore it while the banders were tagging birds. However, something happened that made me more cautious when out in the woods alone. It was a slow summer morning, and I was walking through the forest enjoying the day, when all of a sudden I hear this wailing sound. It sounded like a distressed deer or even a cat. Being the big animal lover I was, I went looking for the wounded animal. It wasn't long before I came to the edge of the property. Something was wrong. However, the noise sounded much farther away than it did before. The woods around me were also completely silent. I happened to look to my left to see a hunter's blind. Once I got closer, I noticed something bizarre. It was badly torn on the sides, as if someone had gotten a knife and sliced into it. Suddenly, I hear the same distant wailing sound again, so I did something stupid. I made the noise right back at the thing, hoping that whatever it was would show itself. Not even 5 minutes later, I hear the low growling noise about 20 yards to my left. Even after wandering the woods for almost all of my life, I never heard a sound like that before. I had to get out of there. I made a run for R's house, and it wasn't long before I came to his yard. I stopped to catch my breath. All of a sudden, I hear the same low growl coming from the bushes less than 10 yards away. So I ran all the way up to the research shed to find R. It wasn't long before I ran into him. I told him the deer had growled at me. It was a very scientific guy, after all, and I doubt he'd believe me, but at the back of my mind I knew this was no deer. I believe whatever it was trying to lure me off the property and do Lord knows what. My name is Philip. This didn't happen to me, it happened to my father back in Mexico. My father is a very spiritual person, and he believes in a lot of stuff. Well, let's get to it. My father, which was a lover of beer and liquor, just as anyone else, was partying with some of his fellow friends in a far town, which is pretty far from where he lives. It was around 2 a.m. when he decided to go home, buzzed out of his mind. He decided to walk home, which was a little pueblo called San Juan. The place where he was at the main city of Oaxaca. Anyone who knows Oaxaca knows that pueblos aren't a 5-minute walk. Walking usually takes hours to get to a pueblo. While on his way home, all buzzed and laughing at jokes or comments he remembers, something got him off guard, a horse coming from the direction of where he was going. This horse was white, and it made that gesture that normally horses make when they're about to run. They get on their two back feet, move the two front feet in the air. I don't know what it's called. Either way, the horse came after my father. Couldn't see it well because he was still buzzed, but once it came closer, my father's eyes got big, and he saw what frightened him so much that he decided to get on the side where the high grass, and he stood there lying on the grass while the horse came right near him. What he saw was a white horse, but no head. It stopped where my father was laying down, and my father said they had just danced back and forth, and then ran into the city where he heard dogs barking at once reaching the city. My father knew it was gone. He continued to walk at this point. His buzz went away due to his fear. Already walking, he mentions about 2 hours, and almost near his pueblo. He heard a chariot coming from another direction, and as you may know, getting a pueblo there are many roads which lead to the city, cemetery, and to many other places. The direction my father heard it coming from, the cemetery. So my father once again hid this time behind some bushes, and with great fear he looked to see what it was, and what he saw still gives him chills and great fear. He saw a chariot, but instead of a wood or metal, it was all bones and wheels. The main structure and even the horses pulling it were all bones. And on the top riding the chariot was Death herself. My father watched as it went off to another pueblo, At this point, my father is full of fear and determined to him that he decided to run home while looking back hopefully. The horse or the chariot won't be chasing him. He got home, scared and out of breath, and he couldn't sleep at all in the night. Later that morning, he went to his grandparents, and where his grandparents slapped him and told him, "Why didn't you just stay the night at the city? It's dangerous at night. That's when the bad spirits come out. You were lucky they didn't decide to take you away." Once seeing this and hearing what he witnessed, he was more careful. If he decides to go to a party again, he will stay there instead of wait until morning shines so he could go home. This happened when he was in his 30s. He's now 58. I know some might say this is fake, but seeing my father tell me this story and him pausing for long periods of times, I know it was all true. Anyone who is from Mexico knows that there are a lot of weird stuff that happen there at night, and more if you live in a pueblo. Thank you guys so much for tuning into Storytime. If you have any stories you would recommend me reading, or any categories in particular you would like to hear, please let me know in the comments or message me as usual. Thank you guys so much. It's always fun reading stories for y'all.